And I'm finding this is the problem with a lot of the people that have disappeared that were associated with John Paul. They basically say, well, we moved on. Well, I don't think you move on from murder. That's my take on it. I think that it's something that stays with you for the rest of your life. I mean, it's like a book that you never finish. Welcome back to the podcast, Chalice Paul Disappear, the True Story. Today we have a very, very, very special guest because it is Chalice Paul. Yes, I know the title's going to be catchy when I say Chalice Paul, we found her and she's alive and well. The only difference is it's another Chalice Paul. So I want to welcome you, Chalice, and you do pronounce it Chalice, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, let me just start off so the audience, so they can hear how this came about. I actually found a new search engine I tried Chalice Alford, Chalice Barnett. That was her former married name. Alford was her maiden name. And Chalice Paul, and then you popped up. And I've seen other backgrounds with the name Chalice, but, different last names. But yours specifically came up Chalice Paul. But without mentioning your new married name, it is your birth name. So let's get that straight. That's your birth name, correct?
Yes.
It is, okay. And you're currently 33 years old.
Yep.
Well,
I turned 34 in November.
Okay. She was 33 when she went missing. So, you never heard of Chalice Paul? You never Googled your name or found out anything about chalicepaul.com?
No, I never thought to Google my own name.
A lot of people do that. Yeah, a lot of people. And, I highly suggest, well, obviously I own your name and every combination, but not, your married name and not your middle name, because you have a different middle name than her. But when I launched chalicepaul.com in 2012, and then of course a Facebook page, Chalice Paul Missing Person, and then during the COVID shutdown, I created a podcast called Chalice Paul Disappear, the True Story in 2020. So, and that's ongoing. That's going to be perpetuity as I meet people and I find people like you and we add you to the podcast. But I bought all the domain names and, I bought my own. So I was told by a newscaster a long time ago, it's advantageous that you buy your own name just so people can't hijack it, So they're all pointing to the website. I was under false pretenses thinking that would increase more traffic, but I'm finding now with my tech specialist that that's not so. So anyways, I launched her on the internet, and now her name is famous. So, therefore, your maiden name is now famous. So, let's start off with, tell me a little bit about you. Where were you born at? You don't have to give me the town, but you can tell me the state.
Born and raised in Missouri.
In Missouri, okay. So, my records were accurate when I found you. I found your former husband, and he's the one that got the message to you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, anyways, did you start reviewing the website and the podcast?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, me and my best friend, because she was my second phone call after I talked to you.
Okay.
And me and her have been going through and chatting about it.
Right, okay. And I know I asked you this, but I want you to repeat it, for the audience out there. How did you get the name Chalice?
My mom had heard it in church and decided that her firstborn daughter was going to be named Chalice, and here I am.
And that was over the Chalice Cup?
Yes.
Okay. Can you, I never really researched that much, but over the years I kept Googling her name, and the Paul Newman movie came up and was mentioning the Chalice Cup. What do you know about the Chalice Cup?
Not much, honestly. I know that chalices were like for wine, for royalty, or offerings or stuff like that. They were kind of fancy.
So it's basically for the Catholic religion?
I would say mostly.
Yeah. So when you go to communion, you have to go up. I used to have a girlfriend that was one of 13 in the family. Her mother had a hole in her diaphragm. She kept getting pregnant all the time. And not being Catholic, because I wasn't raised with any set religion, but my mother was raised Catholic. My father was raised Baptist. And she would go with me, take me with her to communion. And I'd have to go up there and eat the wafer and drink out of the cup. So that cup that they have you take a sip of wine is the chalice cup, or represents that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'm familiar with the chalice cup. So do you follow crime stories?
Yeah. I actually really like true crime.
You do? Okay.
Yes.
So, when you talk to your mother, what did she say? She's like, what? There's actually a woman missing by that name?
Yeah. She was kind of like, I don't know how I didn't know about that, and how weird it was that I was born with that name.
Yeah, well,
the combination just being so out there. It's not like, Sarah.
Yeah.
Right.
It is an unusual name, for sure. Absolutely. Well, without meeting you, are you tall with brown hair and blue eyes?
No, I am 5'2". I'm not tall. I do have brown hair, but I have brown eyes.
Okay. I was saying, maybe you can play her once we get her on the big screen. But that goes through casting, so that's something that's pretty much out of my hands, in regards to that. But what you've heard on the podcast, what stood out the most to you? Did you get up to, you obviously haven't had time to hear all of it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I haven't been able to hear all of it. I haven't gotten too far into it. As a stay-at-home mom, my 2-year-old kind of has me busy most of the time. But I skimmed. For one, she was beautiful.
Yes. Yes, she was. She was drop-dead beautiful. She was an aspiring actress. She was a former flight attendant for Delta Airlines. She met her husband, John Paul Sr., from her first husband, Donald Barnett, who took her to the racetrack at Road Atlanta, and he was doing practice laps, and he introduced her to Chalice. Biggest mistake he ever made. And then John Paul decided to take her in the race car around the track, and she fell smitten for him right there. Next thing you know, she left her first husband for him. So that's all uncovered in the first set, or actually maybe my first introduction. But, I'm finding people that knew her from high school, and people who are now coming forward because, it's getting in circulation. And of course, there's other podcasts that are taking snippets of my images on the website, or some of the voiceover on some of the people I interviewed, which I'm not making a big deal about it because I want the exposure for her and hopefully get law enforcement to investigate her. Did you know that she wasn't investigated? I
did not.
Yes, she was not. She was not reported by a sister, and I verified it with more than one family member that this was the story, because the stories that this sister gave was so far-fetched. And, I later was able, we didn't have, internet back in those days, and we didn't have cellular phones. So, a lot of communications was I had to fly to Atlanta to try to interview people, or I'd had to find somebody with a landline and talk to them on a landline back then. But since I launched her, it opened up doors because the internet was already out, and emails existed. So, I received emails 28 years after she went missing from the same sister who I believe was the one I spoke to when I went back to Atlanta for one of my several trips to do a follow-up. And they didn't have any interest. There was, a conflict with a real estate transaction that involved Chalice's ex-husband's house that she shared, and she was part owner, or she was making a deal with him to exchange it for her mother's house in Madison, Florida. And, she had the house signed over to John Paul. I guess he was going to be a buffer to do the transaction, and that was days before they got married on May 26, 1980, in Lime Rock Park, which was a racetrack up in Connecticut. So she was the witness to that. We since have acquired a lot of hard copy evidence to fit into the timeline of events that took place back then. So that transaction never happened. I guess Donald Barnett was going to take over her mother's house, and she was going to take over Donald's house in Jonesboro, Georgia. And because she disappeared, it created bad blood because the transaction never took place. So there was no transfer of real estate. So therefore, Donald got the Jonesboro house, and John Paul legally owned the mother's house, and he sold it, kept the money. He killed her. I'm sure he killed her. And he didn't kill her for, some little house in Madison. That wasn't the motive. It was just that he knew that the family was dysfunctional and that they weren't going to try to fight him, or they weren't going to follow a paper trail to find out what happened. So they cast blame on Chalice, which is a shame because of that, and of course other issues that were happening within the family. Nobody in the family ever reported her missing. But the one sister, her name's Catherine Christine Murray. She has resurfaced recently on social media and trying to create havoc in my life for my 42 years of research and investigative work, and all the money I spent to launch Chalice on the internet and maintain, a website and campaigning on Facebook and, paying for a podcast. I have no sponsorship. So this is, strictly my decision to do this, because, I want her investigated, one, but I also want her to be on the big screen because she was an aspiring actress, and she was already in one Burt Reynolds movie. She was slated to be in Sharky's Machine, and a week before I talked to her from New York City. I'd recently moved there. She was supposed to rendezvous and meet me up there. And she said, no, I'm going to Florida to hook up with John Paul. We're going to decide if we're going to keep the marriage going or if we're going to get a divorce. And she says, they were getting along great. And they were going to rekindle their relationship. And next thing you know, she disappeared. So another woman went missing, same way. She said she was going to Key West. I can only assume that's the same MO for Colleen Wood. Did you know about Colleen Wood by chance?
No.
Okay. Well, you have to get abreast on the podcast. I do have one person representing Colleen who spoke on behalf of her, because that's an open, active, cold case investigation. The family, the actual immediate family have not participated in the podcast. Not to say maybe they'll have a change of heart, but I think 22 years have gone by. They've moved on with their lives. And I'm finding this is the problem with a lot of the people that have disappeared that were associated with John Paul. They basically say, well, we moved on. Well, I don't think you move on from murder. That's my take on it. I think that is something that stays with you for the rest of your life. I mean, it's like a book that you never finish. So, especially if it's somebody you love who's close to you, you would want to get justice and, or at least the maximum exposure that you could find, to get her name out there. And, she's not the only one. There's millions of people that are missing out there in the world. But, I don't know what more to add. Just tell me a little bit more about you, and I'll do less talking, you do more talking.
I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have 3 kids, a 14-year-old girl, and an 11-year-old girl, and a 2-year-old boy. My hobbies are photography, I crochet. Not much else, kind of boring. I like to read. There's not much exciting going on in this small town in Missouri.
Yeah, I passed through there once when I was traveling cross country. I remember there was a town called Truesdale. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah.
You have?
Yeah.
I think the population, I saw a sign, I think it was like 250. I was on my way to Colorado. I was traveling cross country with a girlfriend. So you heard of Truesdale?
I have.
Wow.
Actually.
Has it gotten bigger?
Doubtful.
Doubtful. Yeah, we were camping out cross country. I was, I quit college to do this with her. She was a high school friend. And we were towing her little VW Bug, and I had a, what was it? It was a Chrysler. Yeah, it was a Chrysler with a Chevy engine. I remember my father was very proud of it because he used to be an auto mechanic. But, it was pretty solid. Most cars were solid back then. But so we had this envision, we're going to go to Colorado. And I think we had to camp out. And I think that was when we went through Truesdale was when there was a rainstorm, like a monsoon. And we had to get up in the middle of the night and leave wherever we were camped because I said, we're going to get stuck here. We're never going to be able to get out of here, with a car that we're towing. But I remember that. And then we ended up in Kansas. We stayed over in Kansas, and then we finally made it to Colorado. And then we went to Boulder. And believe it or not, we were going to go to the Rocky Mountain National Park. And
I've been to Boulder.
Yeah, that's where they have, Golden, Colorado is where they make the Coors. We went to the Coors factory. That was interesting. So when they had 2% beer for underage people could drink it, So we were like 18. But Golden was really cool, hip, college town. And we were going to go camp out up in the Rocky Mountain National Park, and we had seen 2 guys leaving, and we said, hey, is there any campsites up there? They said, no, and it gets, like 20 degrees at night. I don't suggest you go up here and camp out, because we had unleashed, my car and went up there with the little VW. So we went to turn around, and we saw they had Florida tags, and back then they had a number, with a dash, which would indicate what county they're from. So 6 was Palm Beach County, which is where I live. And so we flagged them down, and come to find out one of them knew one of my brothers, and the other one, his girlfriend, was my girlfriend's best friend back in Florida. So they ended up having us follow them back to Boulder and put us up for the weekend. And we went to the big concert there. It was an outdoor concert. I'll never forget it. It was at the university there, but it's beautiful there. Colorado is drop dead gorgeous. I wouldn't want to live there. I like the tropics more. So, have you ever been to Florida?
I'm sorry?
Have you ever been to Florida?
Whenever I was 6.
You were 6?
I was 6, and I went with my aunts, and I don't remember much of it except a seagull stole my sandwich. I remember that. It scarred me for life.
Oh, no.
I will never forget that seagull.
Seagull traumatized you at the age of 6.
Yes.
Did you go to Disney World? Because everybody goes to Disney World when they come here.
I don't think so. I just remember being on the beach.
Okay. What part of Florida?
I have no idea. I was 6. I don't know.
You don't remember? Okay. All right. Well, I want you to spread the word to your hometown and to your family and your friends about my cause, and see if, they can follow us on the newsletter. And we have a YouTube channel. I'm just getting ready to promote it because I have people who are in marketing who are telling me, you need to get some sort of sponsorship. I said, how do I do that? I mean, I don't, how some podcasts, you take a break and then you have to listen to an advertisement and then you go back to the podcast. I'm like that. I find that rude and disinteresting to a viewer, especially if my story's titillating and they want to continue listening to it. And then they go, we'll be right back. Here's a word from our sponsor. But with YouTube, it'll help get the ratings up from what I understand. And once YouTube sees you popular, then I guess they'll sponsor you of some sort. I'm just now getting into the marketing end of this, because my goal was to just get the word out. Now it's growing, and we do have, a potential film offer, docuseries. We've been offered a couple of times. For whatever reason, I refused it. But word is getting out. So I really appreciate you talking to me. And we can touch base after you hear the whole podcast, if you're planning on listening to it. And then I can get some more feedback from you on that.
Okay.
Does that sound like a plan?
It does.
Great. Well, I'm so glad I found you. It was a shocker, to say the least. I mean, what's the chances of that? When I saw, your name and your age, I went, oh my God, this is meant to be. It's meant to be. And I'm sure everybody right now is like, oh man, I thought she was going to come back to life, right? But, she's alive in memory. And may your maiden name help in her search. I'm hoping.
Yes.
And I'm so glad you participated. And we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Alrighty. Thank you so much, Chalice.
No, thank you.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.